guys, welcome back to this week's episode of the Corporate Dropouts. We're now on episode 11. Oh my god, this season is flying by. And actually, exciting news, this is the last episode that we will be doing separately. Yes, so next week we're going to be together. We're going to be together for the next few weeks, so we'll have lots more episodes released and we'll actually be sitting next to each other, and I much prefer that because I like my sister being next to me.
So this week we are doing something a bit different to our usual episodes, where we have actually received some questions from one of our favourite listeners and also someone who we interviewed on our podcast in season 2, which is Ian from CBD Diablo. He actually sent us a couple of questions / topics that he thought would be of interest to him and to other listeners for the podcast. And we thought actually what we do is just answer those all in a podcast episode today. And we thought actually this is quite a nice way of doing podcast episodes. So if anyone else has suggested topics or questions that they'd really love answered, please feel free to drop them into a comment on YouTube or Instagram, or pop us a DM, whatever. And as you will see, we obviously always endeavour to answer all those questions. So, Ian, this episode is for you. Thank you for sending over some really insightful questions. We will do our best to answer them based on the learnings and knowledge that we have so far. Ellie will be reading the questions out, and then we'll both be answering them, basically.
So just to give you a bit of background actually on how we met Ian, we actually interviewed Ian a couple of seasons ago, or actually last season, during our interview series. And Ian and Sam, they own CBD Diablo, which is a CBD oil business, and it's amazing. I've used it to help with my anxiety, and that's how we got in touch with them, because I really admired the business, and we just kind of kept a relationship ever since we interviewed them and found out more about their business. So yeah, they contacted me a few weeks ago, and they just said they were really enjoying the podcast, and actually if we could cover some of these questions, that would be really helpful for them. And we absolutely love that idea. And like Christina said, if anyone else has questions, we will dedicate a whole episode to answering your questions, so please send them in. So yeah, just to get started then, the first question that he asked, and I've got my notes here, so his first question was, what are good techniques to develop healthy business partnerships, anything from clients, suppliers, and even customers, to help kind of, protect yourself and not take things personally, and where to draw boundaries? Absolutely love that question. And Christina and I were discussing this, going through all of these the other day, and we actually think we've kind of looked at this in another episode, but not really in depth. So I think it's a really kind of important question to go into in more detail. So we're very happy that he's brought this one up, because we've all experienced this, I'm sure, where we're not really sure where we should set our boundaries.
Yeah, and we actually thought, based on, there was obviously quite a few different types of or groups of people in that question, and I think actually there's probably like an overarching answer that covers all of them, but then there is really specific ways to deal with all those 3 or 4 different groups. So my first kind of tip for this question would be, and I've talked about this a lot, but it's like really nailing your niche and really like getting clear on who you are, who you serve, what your mission is and your vision is for the business, and never deviating from that. So I think a lot of times especially when you just start out in business, you can feel very much that like everyone else knows better than you, or like if someone disagrees with you, then they must be right because they're further on in their career, or you don't know enough yet, etc., etc. But from experience, I only learned this very late on, like definitely not in the first few years, but like if you're super clear on who you are, what your mission is, what you're trying to achieve, what you're good at, and what you're delivering to your clients, then it's very hard for anyone else to kind of put you off that. And in that respect, it helps you grow kind of strong business relationships that you are feeling confident in, they're feeling confident in. And there's kind of like, even if there is disagreements, you're coming at it from a place of strength with your point of view, and you're not just backing down because you're insecure or because you have imposter syndrome or whatever, or there's so many other reasons why things sort of break down in communication. As an overarching answer to kind of cover all of those groups, I think just being super clear in your niche and sticking to that and being truly aligned to who you are is a really important first step.
And absolutely, again, obviously, last week we did our imposter syndrome episode, and Christina touched on it there. Is in like, if you're confident in your skill set and your abilities, and as Christina mentioned, you're really like, you've honed down on your niche and you know what your offering is, that will naturally build really healthy relationships because you'll be really clear on your their expectations, your expectations. I think sometimes that's when unhealthy business relationships form, is when, and I can admit that I've experienced this and I've probably done this as well, but sometimes if you're not really clear on what you're delivering, people, your clients or customers, they might expect way more than actually what you've offered, just because you haven't been clear on, for this price, this is what you get. And instead you're like, yeah, no, I can throw that in, I can do that, yeah, no worries. And then when you actually come to do it, it's taking way longer and you build up resentment, and they're like, wait, well, this is what you promised, and you're like, no, I can't do it for this price. And that's when you create these unhealthy business relationships. So I think once you've got your confidence, once you're confident on what you're offering, what your niche is, just make sure you're letting them know what to expect really clearly, and not over promising, and not being wishy-washy with your quotes or what you're going to deliver to them. You just got to be really clear on what they will get at the end of it.
And I think that's actually a really good point for when you're hiring contractors or like other agencies or whatever to support you. So I think we've both experienced in the past where we've sort of accepted someone's word, or, you know, we've had conversation with people and we've been like, yeah, okay, that sounds great. And then when it actually comes to them delivering on what they've said, they kind of like haven't stayed true to what they've agreed to in like words, but then they just referred back to like the emails or the proposal that they put together, which then sort of they were able to argue that they were doing what they want. And I think that's again like where trust and communication is kind of only going to get you so far. Like, get super clear and get it all in writing, put the contracts in place, and just treat everything like it's a professional like relationship. Even if you're like, oh, my mate's just going to do my logo for me, it's like that's almost the most important place to get proper legal like contracts put in place or whatever, because otherwise you could end up getting burnt, which we've both experienced. So I think like it's sort of, to me, it's like the business basics is what's going to hold you in, like, is going to keep your business running for a long time. It's like from the beginning, make sure you've got a business vision, a business mission, a business strategy, and like a niche, and then also all the correct legal documents and contracts in place for anyone you're coming across or working with or employing or whatever, just to keep everything tight and everything in alignment. And that's, you're not going to get kind of, you're going to at least lessen the impact if you have a bad interaction then.
And this is just coming from our personal experience, because like Christina's just said, we've all been burnt. If you listen to one of our first episodes this series, like I was like working with a kind of friend from, like a friend of friend, let's keep it like, I'm not going to name names obviously, but friend of friend, you know, we kind of had a friendship of like 8 years ago or something like that, and they're really amazing at their job, but we didn't actually put a contract in place, and we didn't send official quotes, and etc. And I received this massive invoice because I had no idea like how much time was being spent on it, and that wasn't communicated, and that just left me feeling, even though the work was like exactly what I wanted, it just left me feeling really like out of control, especially as like a startup myself. Like, budgets are like crazy small, as I'm sure we all know. So it's just like keeping, even if, you know, the work is getting out of hand and the hours are stacking up and that client can't afford to keep paying you to keep working, like if you just have that communication, those expectations, that could save a relationship that might not be right now. You might not have them as a client or a customer right now, but because you've kept that healthy relationship, when they can afford you, then you'll like get them in the future and they'll have bigger budgets. And you know, you've got to always think about stuff like that and just keep the communication flowing. I think that is the key, is like communication, as it is with all relationships.
Yeah, that is so true. And I think, speaking specifically about clients as well, I truly believe if you are in alignment and you're super confident in who you are and what you're delivering, then if you do come across a client that is difficult to deal with, or you're just not getting the results, or you're just really finding it like hard to work with them, and they're like clearly dissatisfied, and you know, I always, and I've still got to learn this lesson, but like, I think if you're starting to feel like you're not in alignment with a client, then you should cut your losses before it gets too late. I think it's better for you to kind of suggest that you need to step back before which they inevitably will. Like when things start to feel sour, it's only going one way. I feel like, especially in the service industry, personality is quite a big thing, and it's not necessarily about what you do or how good you are at your job. I think if you don't connect with someone, and you're not going to connect with everyone, it's really important to not put yourself through months and months of extra stress, hassle, anxiety, whatever, just for a couple more paychecks, because you will inevitably get to the end of that contract and it will probably end in a more sour way than it would if you just cut your losses when you started to feel unaligned to it. And I think this is something that we all could learn. And I fully appreciate that money is important as a startup. But I believe that by moving someone out of your way that's maybe not in alignment, someone better will come along, and you'll learn the lesson that just stick to what you're good at, basically, and stay in alignment with what you truly believe you can offer to the world, and then the clients will follow.
Yeah.
And I think that's just a really important. And I think it's the same for product businesses. Like, stick to your niche and stick to who you're trying to serve, rather than trying to expand your product range in the hope that you'll reach a bigger audience, in the hope that you'll then get more money. You know, I think if you really get clear on who you're targeting and make your products for them, then the success will inevitably follow.
And actually brings us really nicely on to the next question that we got sent, which is, how do you spot a client that's going to cause you more harm than good? So yeah, Christina's had a lot of experience with this, obviously being a service business. And I think, yeah, like what Christina just said, it's just about using your intuition. And I can agree, like as a product business, not necessarily a client, but maybe like someone I hire, again, it's like how much... it's just, you just know. I think you do just know, don't you, when you're working with someone, you're like, this isn't as easy as it should be. Like there's already a few red flags popping up.
Yeah. And I think like the longer you go on, the more confident you become in yourself. And it's kind of like, it's the same with life, isn't it? Like the more life experience you get, the more you're able to trust your intuition and just really go with your own gut, instead of feeling like the other person's always right, or that you know, are doing something wrong, basically. And I think this comes back to mindset so much, because it's like I think if you have a bad client, you always fester over that, but you never like keep reminding yourself of like the 20 amazing clients you've had for the one that's not satisfied. And I think if you reframe your thoughts, like you need to kind of just remember that you have done a good job and so many other clients are satisfied. So if there's one that isn't, like just cut your losses quickly and find a better client. Like there's always going to be more people who want to work with you. So it is really just being confident in what you're delivering. And I think, and obviously don't piss someone off by being like, you're a shit client, I don't want to work with you. But I think just as soon as you feel things starting to go sour, address the problem. Don't like hide your head in the sand and hope that they don't notice, because obviously they're going to notice. And just sort of say like, can we have a chat about this? And if it is solvable, great. But also just, you know, be upfront and be like a grown up about it, and just face up to the fact that things aren't always going to work in your favor.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Just stand, like, be confident, stand up to them. And obviously it is easier once you have like a few years under your belt doing this and lots of satisfied clients. You have more kind of like ammunition to be like, no, I know I'm good at my job, like what's going wrong here? Obviously say it in a nice way, but you can just be like, look, there seems to be some sort of like disconnect, and you're clearly not satisfied. Like I am trying my hardest, and maybe this relationship isn't meant to work. You know, it is a hard one between not giving up and trying to save that client and try and pivot your strategy. But then I think there is a point, if your kind of mental health is taking a hit, and you're constantly stressing and you're spending a lot more time on this client for not really anything back, then it is time to cut your losses and just be like, do you know what, actually, like this isn't, I just don't think we've got the same kind of expectations from the outcome of this project.
And also, I think from a marketing perspective specifically, like there is actually no guarantee that if you're marketing something, that your product or your service that you're marketing is going to be a hit. Like it's not always necessarily the problem with the marketing strategy. It could be that they haven't done enough research into whether their product is a viable product for the market, or then maybe their sales strategy is wrong, or there's so many other things that could go wrong. And I think from a marketing perspective, especially, I've learned this year in particular that it's not always down to you to help the client like increase their revenue. Like marketing is about building awareness. And I think I've had a lot of clients in the past where they thought, oh, I'll hire a marketing agency and then we'll triple our sales. And it's like, obviously it's going to be part of it, but it's not, if it's not working, it's not necessarily down to the marketing. And sort of flipping and switching and changing your strategies every 3 months because you're not seeing the return you want could mean that there's something wrong with your product, not with the marketing strategy. And I've sort of reminded myself that about that as well. It's like, it's not always personal. It could just be that it's, a business problem, and that's fine. It's not that your abilities aren't correct. So I think it's always like, if there is a problem and you've had good clients in the past and you know what you're doing, take a step back and just have a conversation with the client, look at everything objectively and look at what problems there could be and where maybe you could change or update your program, and just look at things. Like, don't be scared of a problem. Basically, just keep trying to look at solutions, and then if there isn't, just cut your losses and be kind of be upfront about that.
That's another good point, because I'm working with, obviously I have a product business, I'm working with a marketing agency now, and what they said to me is like 85% of the time their clients see a return on their investment within month 2 or 3. And I was like, okay, so what point is it 100% return? Like, was it month 3 or 4, or how does that work? And they were like, no, it's never 100%, because, and they literally set this expectation out to me really clearly. It's like, we can do everything we can behind the scenes, get it in front of all the right eyes, and do all the amazing branding campaigns, everything. But if your product is shit and your customer service is shit and your shipping is shit and like everything is just rubbish on the front end, then that's out of our control. We can't control that. And that literally ties in really well with Christina's point there. Is like, obviously very specific to marketing, but knowing those kind of facts about your own business is so good, for because that set my expectation. Because I know, like, if 85% of their clients get a return in month 3 and I'm in month 3 and I'm not getting a return, and they've got proof to show me that all their clients with a good product do get a return, then that's when I can not take it personally, but just think, actually, right, what is going wrong with the product? Is it my customer service? Is it arriving in like a damaged state? Like, what's happening? Let's go and explore that. It's not like, right, let's blame this person, this marketing agency, because, they haven't delivered what they promised. It's like, well, no, they never actually promised that. They said, if the product is viable, then we will see that return.
And I think I love, like, that is, again, I think a lot of people, and I think this is very true of product businesses, I think when you launch a product business, you almost think like, if I'm not going viral on day 1, then that means I'm a failure. And actually building businesses is like a lifetime commitment, right? And you're constantly going to be tweaking, changing, learning, adapting, evolving. And it's like, that's fine. And that's perfectly normal. Your business is not going to be perfect from day 1. It's still not going to be perfect by year 6. Like, I can promise you, you're always going to be changing. The market changes so frequently. Your customers change so frequently. Like, you're always going to be having to have your finger on the pulse and updating. So don't just automatically assume like, oh, well, I've not made £1 million in sales this year, so, the business is shit, or my marketing agency is shit. It's like, there's so many different things that could be like needing to be tweaked and changed and updated. And don't see it as a failure. Just see it as another, your next challenge in growing a business. Like, it's always going to be like that. We've completely gone off the question, but I think it was quite a relevant point to make. Sorry.
No, but I think question 1 and 2, so about good health, how to create good healthy business relationships, and how to avoid clients that are going to cause you a massive headache. They're hand in hand with each other, because I think the key points here was just like, be confident in your business, in your niche, in your service you're offering, your product you're offering, and set your expectations with that client or customer. Don't overpromise, be realistic, and you can't really go wrong, to be honest.
Yeah. And just accept that problems and failures and, missteps are very common and part of your business journey, and just, be prepared to face them, and don't think of it as a failure.
No, never. Like, me and Christina can both look back and say, well, that failed, but it didn't fail. We just learned a massive lesson. And then, when we meet someone else like that now, we've already got the answer. We know we can kind of predict what's going to happen. We can stop it happening. Amazing. So then the next question that Ian sent in was, how do you create a brilliant business structure with employees, from defining their roles, how to build a team with a single goal in mind? And then he's kind of answered his own question here, but he said, I suppose that ties into creating a robust ethos and mission for the brand. And we agree. We definitely agree.
Yeah.
So
I think, again, I mean, all these questions do tie back to getting your shit together from the very beginning and like really getting clear on what your business mission is, what your vision is, what your business strategy is. And then I would say for the first kind of initial hires, always try and hire above you, or like at least hire people who are better than you in a certain area. And then after you've got that really strong team around you, you can build below and like give them support from managers and execs or whatever. But I'd say having a really clear mission and trying to build a business plan out that's probably like 5 years on, at least for the first 3 to 5 years, and be really clear about the milestones you want to hit, and therefore what strategic hires you're going to make, you know, in month 6, month 12, 18 months, whatever it may be. And then look at, the areas within which you're weakest. So it might be that you hate doing client services. So your first hire will be, once you've got 5 clients under your belt, you're going to hire a client services director because they can then deal with all the customer service stuff. Or you'll need to hire a financial director because you hate numbers, whatever it may be. Just like really map those out and be super clear on like the milestones you want to hit. But just make sure that, I think a lot of people put like job descriptions together based on what they believe the person should bring to the role, which is of course important. But I think you always need to make sure that that person is aligned to your mission as well as a business, to make sure, especially if they're like in the managerial or board positions, they need to really be clear on what your mission is as a business and make sure that they're aligned to it as well.
I couldn't agree more. I think it is about, first of all, learning what your business, getting really clear on the direction of your business, what your business is offering, what your business is, before you then try and relay that goal to someone else. And then also being really clear with yourself and knowing your strengths and weaknesses. So hiring above you, I do agree with that. But I think also just like, maybe I'm really good at design personally, but I'm really shit at marketing, and I'm really shit at accounts. So I'm going to hire an accountant and I'm going to hire a marketing agency, because even though I know I could do it, I could spend, 5 days a week doing my accounts, learning how to do accounts, learning how to do taxes, blah, blah, blah. My time is better spent elsewhere with my skill set. And actually, if I pay someone to do those for me, then that's going to clear up a lot of my time to focus on the things I am good at, which will like set the business above the rest. So I think it's just getting really clear on your own skills, your own strengths and weaknesses, and also just getting really clear on the vision of the business, because that's so much. When you do hire, someone will pick up your passion and your goal really clearly, just from, if you know it deep inside yourself and you're so confident and you stick to that mission and goal throughout your whole time in the business, like everyone will generally be able to pick that up without you reminding them all the time.
I think from the beginning, like I was just thinking about this. So I think to create that business strategy and that map of what your business will look like for the next 5 years, I would actually hire someone to help you develop that and to ask you the hard questions. Like, I think from watching Ellie grow her business over the last year or so, I think one of the things I should have done a long time ago is hire in more of a business mentor or a strategist or even a partner, just to help me so I'm not doing it alone, because I certainly would have got to where I would have done this a lot quicker, right? And I think, so I've just hired a business mentor / coach, and it's like already being transformative. And I think to set out a 5-year plan, it's really important to have someone asking you the right questions, and someone with a bit more experience if you're a startup, to help you put that plan together. And there's a girl we interviewed on season 2 of the podcast called Christina, and she does this. And I think she like basically takes your business plans and helps you map out like what profit you need to hit to be able to hire this person, but you can still take this profit out of, which you need to sustain your life, etc., etc. And someone like that, I think, would be so helpful just when you're setting up. So I definitely say, like, map out your hires, but get someone to help you map out as well, basically. And don't be scared to invest in people like that, because they will always bring you back revenue. Like it's always going to be worth the investment.
Yeah, and I think I personally find being an entrepreneur a very lonely journey. So having someone like that, like a business mentor, is because I've often thought about it. I was always so keen to just start on my own and do this all by myself. But as time goes on, I'm like, oh my God, it would be so nice to just have someone to like who's almost as passionate about me as the business, just bounce off. They've got my best interests at heart. Just like half the struggle of having a business is trying to make all the decisions yourself, and you start doubting yourself. So if you have someone else to kind of like bounce off, and especially when it comes to hiring, if you've got this like business mentor that's kind of been with you from the beginning, you're like, right, I'm looking to hire. And like Christina said, the Christina who we interviewed in series 2 would be a great person to talk to and just be like, yeah, you've been along this journey the whole way. I want to hire someone. I want them to be amazing. I want to like them to be like, take the business to the next level with me. How much can I afford? How is this viable kind of thing? How can I do it? I think
it gives you like the confidence to make those decisions, I think, because you're sort of like, oh my God, am I qualified to do this? Like, especially when it's a big monetary investment, like if you're hiring someone, it's good to just feel like, okay, I've double checked my facts. I know that this is a strategic move and this is going to work out, So yeah, I think that is the best way to do it.
Yeah. Right. Then the next question is, when and where would a lawyer be helpful? I haven't had loads of experience with lawyers. I think back in series 1, I spoke a little bit about intellectual property. I had a problem with my trademark, basically my name being maybe kind of taken, stolen, and I got it's all worked out in the end, don't worry guys. But I got a lawyer involved then, but an intellectual property lawyer. And they were great. I just hired them for what I needed. They helped me set some more trademarks, put some more trademarks in place to protect me further. And I've not had a problem since. But apart from that, I'm probably not the best person to answer this question because I haven't really used a lawyer as such.
Yeah, so I guess from my point of view, like I would always say, so I think legally, everyone needs terms and conditions and a privacy policy, especially if you're collecting data in any form. But I always felt, I mean, again, it might be a service-based business thing, but I think as a product business, you probably need terms and conditions and like customer protection in place anyway. But I got a lawyer involved at the very beginning just to put in some basic things like my terms and conditions, my freelancer contracts, my client contracts, all of that sort of thing. And so I had them all in place, ready, and like and they sort of give me advice on how to make sure that they're legally binding. So like you have to send them to the client, they have to be an email chain. They obviously have to return them signed. You have to outline these things in the email, like just stuff you wouldn't even think about. And I personally believe that it's good to have those things in place before a disaster strikes rather than after, because it's very easy to be like, oh, this person seems really nice. I'm sure they'll stick to my, 1 month notice period and blah, blah, blah. But like, again, in business, it's not personal. Everyone's out for themselves. If they can wiggle their way out of some form of paying, if they don't want to pay or whatever, they will. So just having these things in place. And again, with people you hire, everyone you hire, whether it's a good friend, whether it's someone you know through a friend, whatever, just having a contract in place to state exactly what you're expecting from them, when it's due, blah, 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 is just so important to get that written. And it protects everyone. It's not just about you. So I would say from the very beginning, get at least the basic contracts in place and terms and conditions and privacy policies and whatever that you need. Yeah. And then you have a lawyer there who's very aware of what business you're setting up. And then if you ever need any other advice, you can ring them or whatever and be like, look, I need this help, because it is quite hard otherwise to just like Google a lawyer and be like, oh, I need this. And you don't, is it cost effective? I don't know. Do they know your business? Probably not. So I'd say it's like having an accountant on side, get a lawyer on side from the beginning, get the basics set up, and then they're there if you need them.
Yes. And I think that's a good point going on the privacy policy and the terms and conditions things. What I found is if you are setting up a product business and you're getting a website, I've obviously used Shopify for mine, and they provide all that kind of legislation for you. You just kind of put in your details and they write it up for you, which has been like super helpful for me. Obviously, you've got to read and check that you agree with everything they're saying. But just for your website, and like Christine said, if you're collecting data and stuff and you need these things on your website, Shopify is brilliant for just producing them for you.
I was going to say on that point, there's obviously a lot more like legislation coming out about data. The only reason I'm talking about this is because one of my clients is literally about data compliance. But I think there's, even knowing what laws you need to be abiding by is really important, so you're not caught out. Like, I think having someone there just to be like, oh, have you thought about this law? Have you thought about this data law? Have you thought about this, what's the word? Like, business insurance law, like whatever, like just someone who knows and just says this is what you need to be thinking about and acting on is also really important.
Yeah, definitely. And then also, like, if you can't, I know obviously lawyers are really expensive, and if you don't need, our advice would be to get a lawyer, like Christine said, on your side from the beginning. Just as and when you need them, you're able to pay and use their services. But I needed like a contract written up really quickly for when I was doing a transaction with China. So I literally just went on Fiverr and hired a lawyer, a Chinese English lawyer who is really familiar with like product, very specific niche. And he wrote up my whole contract for me when I was dealing with buying goods off my supplier. And he wrote it in Chinese and English, and it didn't cost me probably nearly as much as it would if I'd gone to, a London lawyer or something like that. Obviously that would always be my preference. If I could afford a very good quality lawyer, always get the best of what you can afford. But in this case, in this scenario, I was under a strict budget, and actually I knew what I wanted to say in my contract. I was able to tell him. Did a bit of research of my own, what should be in a contract between a customer and a supplier, and then he was able to write it up for me. So that's always another solution. But just again, having those expectations in place. This podcast is actually about expectation. But just having that in place will just save you so much headache down the line.
So yeah, I feel like there's been quite a lot of business advice given in this, which is really good actually, because we've talked about mindset a lot in this series already. So I hope that that's really helpful. There are a couple of other questions that Ian sent, but I feel like we're going to save those for another episode so we don't sort of bombard you all with too much information. But as we said at the beginning, we love getting questions from listeners. So if you have any that you'd like us to answer on the podcast, then please let us know.
Yeah, literally. This is like one of our favourite podcast formats because we love doing the question and answers because it gets us thinking as well. And we always just love to bring our learnings from our past experience into this podcast. That's what it's all about. So please do send us any questions, even if it's just one or two. We can do an episode with a mixture of your questions and just go through all of the ones that we think everyone will find helpful. So we hope you enjoyed this episode, everyone, and always please leave your comments or your thoughts below. Remember, we're on YouTube, Spotify and Apple. So yeah.